Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere quieter, to a life that moves slower than the turning of a page, to a world shaped not by kings or conquests, but by the sound of a single bell in the dark. This isn't a story about warriors or battles, it's about what life is really like in the courtyards swept before sunrise, in the halls that breathe with ancient chanting, in the long, silent hours where thought itself grows still. So if you've ever wondered, what did Buddhist monks actually do all day and more? Dim the lights, get cozy, and let the hum of temple life carry you towards sleep. You are asleep, or at least you think you are, until it happens. Somewhere in the pitch-black silence of the monastery, a sound slices through the night like a polite but unavoidable earthquake. It is not the melodic chime of a crystal alarm clock, nor the digital trill of a smartphone app promising you morning serenity. No, this is the monastery's great bell, a bronze behemoth suspended in its wooden frame, and it is being struck with a padded log the size of your torso. The first, deep, resonant gong doesn't just wake you, it rearranges you. The vibration rolls across the courtyard, seeps through the paper walls of your tiny sleeping quarters, and finds your bones. The second strike follows, as deliberate and unhurried as the turning of the earth, and by the third, you know there will be no slipping back into the dream where you were halfway through eating a warm cinnamon bun. This is not a suggestion to wake up. This is a command from the ancient machinery of tradition itself. The monks call it the morning bell, a name far too modest for what it really does. You are not merely waking, you are being summoned into a day that began centuries before you were born. The air in your room is cold, not crisp, invigorating cold like a winter morning jog, but the kind of cold that makes you wonder if your blanket is woven from disappointment. It clings to your skin as you shuffle to sit upright on your thin futon or straw mat, trying to remember if you still have knees. Outside, the darkness is so complete it feels physical. The monastery is perched somewhere between forest and sky, far enough from cities that no street lamp dares intrude. Only the dim glow of a lantern or two marks the path toward the meditation hall. The bell continues its measured rhythm, each strike a reminder that the day does not care whether you are ready. You pull on your robe, or in your case, some approximation of one, and step into sandals, or, if you want to blend in, simply go barefoot. The stones beneath your feet are icy, the kind that make your toes question their loyalty to your body. The sound of the bell is not just a wake-up call for humans. The crows in the cedar trees stir restlessly. Somewhere, a dog in the village lets out a single confused bark. The whole landscape seems to acknowledge the sound. The monks believe the bell is not merely heard, it is received. It is an offering to all beings, a call to awaken, not just from sleep, but from the heavier dream of everyday distraction. For you, it is also a reminder that breakfast is still several eternities away. You join the slow, silent procession moving toward the meditation hall. No one speaks. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the soft creak of wooden gates, the long echo of the bell, these are the only voices allowed. Your breath is a faint cloud in the cold, mixing with the faint scent of pine and the damp memory of last night's rain. Somewhere in the distance, the bell's final notes linger like ripples on a pond, fading but refusing to vanish completely. Inside the hall, the air is warmer, though not by much. The floorboards creak under the weight of careful steps. Everyone moves as though underwater, deliberately, fluidly, with a kind of slowness that makes you hyper-aware of the present moment. You find your place on the cushion, fold your legs beneath you, and wait. The bell has done its job. You are awake, whether you like it or not. And so the day begins, not with coffee, not with emails, but with the deep, metallic heartbeat of a tradition that knows no snooze button. Tomorrow, it will happen again, and the day after that, and the day after that, until the sound no longer wakes you, but becomes the space you wake into. There comes a point in your monastic life when you realize the hair has to go. Not because it's too long, not because it's summer, and not because you're looking for a radical new style to impress someone who is very much not looking back. No, this is about something far less fashionable and far more symbolic. the deliberate removal of all that keratin sprouting from your scalp. The monastery does not see hair as a glorious crown of individuality. It sees it as one more thing to feed the ego, a distraction in protein form. And so, the clippers, the razor, or, if you're going truly old school, the straight blade, comes out. You might imagine this as a serene, candlelit ritual, soft chanting in the background, perhaps a lotus blossom floating in a bowl of water nearby. In reality, it's a little less cinematic. Usually, it happens in a small side room that smells faintly of soap and faintly more of mildew. You sit on a stool while an older monk, the kind whose face has already achieved that calm, unreadable, I've seen everything expression, begins working the blade against your head. There's no mirror. You're not here to critique your look. The sound is intimate, a scraping, a soft whisper of hair giving way, followed by the odd clump falling down your neck and making you twitch. In the early days, the razor work is not exactly perfect. Monks are not barbers, and the occasional nick or uneven patch is part of the process. If you came in expecting a smooth salon finish, you will leave wiser. The point is not to walk out looking polished. The point is to walk out with nothing between your bare scalp and the wind except the lesson you've just participated in. Hair is just hair, and identity is just another thing to put down. There is a moment when the last strip is shaved and your head feels strangely vulnerable. You're aware of every shift of air, every tiny drop of sweat rolling down from your crown. It's like someone has turned up the volume on your skin. That vulnerability is the point. The absence of hair is meant to remind you that the body is not yours to decorate endlessly. It's a temporary guest house you're sweeping clean. And sweeping clean means letting go of the attachment to how you present yourself to the world. The symbolism runs deep. In Buddhist tradition, the act of shaving is not just a sign of renunciation, it's a physical enactment of shedding the self. It's a vow made visible. You are saying, in effect, I will not cling to the past, to vanity, to the endless game of looking like someone worth looking at. The blade takes away the hair, but it also takes away the illusion of permanence. What you think of as you is already changing. Even your scalp, newly exposed, will grow hair again, unless, of course, you keep shaving it every few weeks, which you will. When it's over, you run your hand over the new terrain of your head. It is smooth in places, prickly in others, but undeniably bare. The older monk gives you a brief nod. No applause, no, wow, you look amazing, no selfie session to mark the occasion. You simply bow, gather your robe, and step back into the quiet rhythm of the day. The first time you catch your reflection, you may feel a shock. There's a stranger looking back at you, a stripped-down version of yourself, with eyes that seem somehow larger and unshielded. But with each passing day, you stop noticing. You forget what you looked like with hair. Eventually, the shaved head becomes the default. Not a style, not a statement, just a reminder. A reminder that in the monastery, you are here to loosen the grip of the self, starting from the top down. There's something you learn quickly in the monastery. The robe is not just clothing. It's an ecosystem, a tradition, a puzzle, and occasionally a source of mild morning frustration. You don't just throw it on like a hoodie, you assemble it. And you do so while maintaining the appearance of absolute serenity, even when the fabric is clearly conspiring against you. The first thing you notice about a monk's robe is that it's not tailored. It is not your size. It is everyone's size, which means it is no one's size. It's a length of fabric that, if laid out flat, could double as a picnic blanket for 8 people. The colour is usually somewhere between muted earth and this used to be maroon, but the sun had other plans. Its texture is utilitarian, coarse enough to remind you that silk is for weddings you will not be attending. Putting it on is an exercise in mindfulness, whether you want it to be or not. There are layers, folds, tucks, and knots, each done in a specific sequence passed down through centuries. It's not just about modesty, it's about discipline. A robe tied hastily is a robe that will betray you halfway through morning meditation, pooling around your waist like a defeated curtain. You begin by wrapping the inner layer snugly around your torso, creating a base that will hold the rest in place. Then comes the outer layer, folded carefully over your left shoulder, leaving the right shoulder bare, a symbolic gesture of openness and humility. The fabric must be smoothed, not bunched. Every edge should fall where it belongs, though it rarely does on the first try. Adjust, readjust, breathe. The older monks make it look effortless, which is exactly the point. Centuries of tradition have a way of turning clothing into choreography. The sash or belt is the final piece, tying everything together. Literally. It's not a fashion statement, but it does have one very important job: keeping your robe from falling off while you bow, sit, walk, or sweep the courtyard. A loose knot and you will know fear. The robe's meaning runs deeper than its folds. It is a reminder that you are part of something larger than yourself, a lineage of practitioners stretching back to the Buddha's time. The garment was originally stitched from discarded rags, dyed in natural colours, a declaration of poverty and detachment. Even now, when the fabric is cleaner and the stitching neater, the robe still carries that same spirit. You wear it not to stand out, but to disappear into the role of a monk. Once you've tied the final knot and smoothed the last fold, you step out into the cool morning air. The robe moves differently than any clothes you've worn before. It sways. It wraps. It reminds you with every step that you are here to walk a path. Slowly, deliberately, and without worrying if your outfit makes you look taller. By the time the robe is settled, and your head still tingles from its recent shave, the next act of the morning begins. The arms round. In theory, it's simple. Monks walk through nearby streets with bowls, villagers place food inside, everyone bows politely, and the day goes on. In practice, it's a slow-moving ritual that feels part pilgrimage, part silent theatre. You step out of the monastery gates in single file, barefoot or in simple sandals. The air is cool enough to make you wish you'd eaten breakfast already, but breakfast is the very reason you're here. There is no pantry waiting for you back at the monastery. Monks do not shop, farm, or cook for themselves. They depend entirely on whatever is placed in their bowls this morning, a daily reminder that life is not yours to control. The alms bowl is heavy, smooth, and deep, like a fragment of the night sky turned upside down. You cradle it against your side, supported by a strap across your shoulder. The lid rests loosely on top, hiding the empty space within. Villagers will not hand food directly to your hands. They will place it inside the bowl without contact, a gesture of respect and boundary. The walk itself is silent. The only sounds are the soft padding of feet on dirt, the occasional clink of the bowl's lid, and the rustle of robes in the breeze. People emerge from their homes as you pass. Some are already waiting, holding small baskets of rice, fruit, or vegetables. Others bring packaged snacks from the local shop. The offerings are humble but given with sincerity. Each giver bows, pressing palms together, and you bow in return. No words, just the shared understanding that this exchange is sacred. In Buddhist tradition, this ritual isn't just about feeding monks. It's about weaving the spiritual life into the fabric of the community. The villagers gain merit through generosity. The monks practice humility through dependence. No one leaves with exactly what they want. Everyone leaves with what they are given. Sometimes the offerings are practical and nourishing, warm, sticky rice, bananas, cooked greens. Other times they are creative, a single potato, a candy bar, an uncut melon too large for your bowl. Once in a while, you receive something so puzzling you can't help but imagine the giver's thought process. Still, you bow in thanks. The point is gratitude, not menu planning. When the round is done, the bowls are noticeably heavier. You return in the same single file, the line of monks slipping back into the monastery courtyard like a tide returning to shore. The food will be shared at the communal meal, the one and only meal of the day that isn't eaten in complete darkness. For now, you remove the strap from your shoulder, set down the bowl, and realize something unexpected. You're not just carrying food, you've been carrying the village's trust, and you'll carry it again tomorrow. Back from the alms round, the food gathered in your bowl is not yours alone. Everything is pooled together in the dining hall, sorted without fuss or commentary. This is not a buffet. There is no lining up to get the good things before anyone else. A monk eats what is given, in the portion that is placed before him, without a flicker of preference showing on his face. The dining hall is a long, simple room with polished wood floors and an air of orderly stillness. Cushions are arranged in neat rows. The bowls, large, round, black lacquered, are set in front of each place. Monks enter in silence, robes whispering against the floor, and sit cross-legged facing one another. No one rushes. Eating is not a task to be gotten over with here. It is a continuation of practice. When the food is served, it arrives without ceremony. Rice, vegetables, perhaps a little fruit, occasionally something surprising like tofu or a small square of cake from a festival offering. Everything is placed carefully in the bowl in small sections. There is no mixing, no piling, no seconds. This is the meal, the only meal of the day, and it will need to carry you until dawn tomorrow. The rule is simple: eat in silence. Not polite, let's not talk about politics silence, but total silence. The only sounds are the soft scrape of a spoon against the bowl, the faint rustle of fabric as someone adjusts their seat, the almost imperceptible sigh of steam rising from the rice. You don't look around to see what others got. You don't comment on whether the vegetables are overcooked. You eat, slowly, mindfully, as if the act of chewing itself were a form of meditation. In the monastery, gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a practice. Every bite is received with the understanding that it came from somewhere, from a farmer's labour, from the hands of the person who cooked it, from the generosity of the villager who placed it in your bowl that morning. Nothing is taken for granted, even if today's portion happens to be 3 lumps of cold pumpkin and a banana that's seen better days. When the eating is finished, the bowls are rinsed with a small amount of water, swirled and drunk to ensure nothing goes to waste. It's an efficient, faintly startling moment, the same bowl that held your food now holding your rinse water, which you swallow without hesitation. Waste is a luxury the monastery does not entertain. There is no lingering at the table. No, just one more bite, or stretching the meal with small talk. Once everyone has finished, the bowls are stacked, the cushions tidied, and the hall empties as quietly as it filled. The body is fed, and so is the practice. You step outside, the midday light already beginning to shift, and realize that silence has a taste. And today it tasted of rice and vegetables. Long before the arms round and the quiet meal, before the first real hint of daylight, there is chanting. It begins in the dark, when the air is still and the sky is the deep, unbroken blue of night, clinging to its last moments. The meditation hall is already lit by the dim, steady glow of oil lamps or low electric bulbs, light enough to see, but not enough to make you forget it's still night. Monks file in silently, finding their places on cushions arranged in precise rows. Chanting is not singing, though to an untrained ear it might sound like a strange, monotone hymn. There is no melody in the conventional sense. It is rhythmic, measured, and ancient, a sequence of syllables recited in Pali or Sanskrit, languages that most of the monks do not speak conversationally, but know intimately through repetition. The words are not meant to be understood in the everyday sense. They are meant to be felt. The sound begins low, like the hum of a distant engine, and then deepens as more voices join. It is not the sharp, clear chorus of a choir, but a layered, vibrating wave. You can feel it in your chest as much as you hear it in your ears. Every phrase has a cadence, every pause its own weight. The group breathes almost as one, inhaling and exhaling in patterns that seem as old as the walls themselves. The chants are verses from the sutras, teachings of the Buddha preserved for centuries, and they are delivered with an unhurried certainty, as though the monks believe the universe has all the time in the world, which, from their point of view, it does. There is no rush to finish the chant. The point is the chanting itself, not arriving at the end of it. For a newcomer, it can feel both hypnotic and bewildering. Your mind drifts, catching on a syllable here, a vibration there. Sometimes you realize you've stopped reciting altogether, simply listening to the ocean of sound around you. At other times, you're too focused on getting the unfamiliar words right, your voice stumbling over the sequence while the others continue without missing a beat. No one corrects you. The chant absorbs all imperfections. The repetition is the meditation. The voice is the vehicle. The mind rides the sound the way a leaf rides a river, sometimes smooth, sometimes caught in eddies, but always moving forward. You don't chant to be heard. You chant to dissolve into the sound, to stop being a separate you chanting and simply become chanting itself. When the final phrase comes, it is not announced. The sound fades naturally, the voice is thinning until only a few remain, and then silence. A silence so complete it feels like part of the chant. The hall stays still for a moment longer, as if the air itself is finishing its own verse. Then, quietly, the monks bow, stand, and step into the day already begun. If you have ever sat still for more than 10 minutes and thought to yourself, "This isn't so bad," you have never meditated like a monk. Here, stillness is not a casual choice. It is the entire point. After the chanting, the monks settle into meditation, and they do it the way it has been done for centuries, by sitting very still and facing the wall. It is not an exciting wall. It does not have a mural or a window view. It is just a plain wall, smooth and pale, a surface designed to give your eyes absolutely nothing to work with. The idea is simple. Remove distractions and the mind will follow. The reality is less romantic. The moment you settle on your cushion, your knees begin negotiating with your hips, your back reminds you of its existence, and you suddenly remember every itch you have ever had in your life. The posture is exact. Legs folded in the half lotus or full lotus position if your joints allow it, or cross-legged if they don't. Hands form an oval in your lap, thumbs lightly touching, as though holding an invisible egg. Shoulders relaxed, spine tall but not rigid, chin tucked slightly inward. Eyes half closed, resting on the floor just ahead of you or directly on the blank wall. Breathing natural, quiet, like you've been doing it your whole life without thinking. Which, in fact, you have. At first you think about your breathing. Then you think about the fact that you're thinking about your breathing. Then you think about not thinking about your breathing. And so the game begins. Thoughts arrive like uninvited guests at a silent party. Some are loud and demanding. Others sneak in quietly and linger. The practice is not to push them away, but to notice them, let them pass, and return to the breath. Over and over. For minutes, for hours, for what feels like days. The wall becomes your companion. It is neither encouraging nor discouraging. It simply exists, the same now as it was when you first sat down. You project onto it boredom, restlessness, peace. But the wall remains unmoved. In Zen tradition, this is the point. By sitting with the wall, you sit with yourself, stripped of stimulation, stripped of excuses. Pain arrives, usually in the knees or lower back, sometimes as a dull ache, sometimes as a bright, persuasive argument for standing up immediately. You breathe through it, reminding yourself that discomfort is not danger, though your legs may disagree. Time loses shape. You wonder how long you've been sitting. 5 minutes? 40? A lifetime? Then a bell rings softly, the same way it did to begin the session, and the world rushes back in. You stand slowly, blood returning to your legs like a tide. The wall, still there, offers no congratulations. That's the beauty of it. Tomorrow you will sit again, and the wall will wait. After sitting motionless for what feels like the better part of your life, the monks rise for walking meditation. This is not the brisk, swinging arm stroll you might take around the park. It is movement slowed to the point where a passing snail might seem ambitious. The purpose is not to go anywhere in particular, but to be aware of each step, each shift of weight, each breath that happens as the body moves. The group lines up in single file, robes swaying gently with the first steps. Hands are clasped loosely in front or behind, posture upright, eyes lowered to a soft gaze a few feet ahead. No one is looking at the scenery. No one is getting their steps in. The path is often circular, around the meditation hall, along the cloister walkway, sometimes through a small garden, a route so short that, in ordinary life, you could cover it in seconds. Here, it will take you minutes, maybe more. Each step begins with the lifting of the foot, felt as a deliberate event. The foot moves forward, the heel touches down, the sole meets the earth, and the weight shifts. Then the other foot follows. It is a cycle so simple, so repetitive, that your mind will almost immediately attempt an escape. thoughts of lunch, thoughts of the past, thoughts about how this would be easier in sneakers. The practice is to notice these thoughts and return again and again to the sensation of walking itself. There is a rhythm that develops, quiet but steady. The soft swish of robes, the faint creak of wooden floorboards, or the crunch of gravel under bare feet. Breathing synchronizes naturally with the pace, slower than your usual breath, as if the lungs have agreed to match the stillness of the mind you're trying to cultivate. The beauty of walking meditation is that it reminds you that mindfulness isn't confined to a cushion. Life moves. You move with it. There is nothing to achieve here. No finish line. No applause waiting at the end of the path. The point is the step itself, the simple fact of the body in motion, awake to its own presence. Occasionally, the line will pause. The leader may stop and stand silently for a moment, and everyone else does the same. Then, with no announcement, the walking resumes. It is a wordless agreement, an unspoken rhythm held by the group. After a time, the final step of the last circuit is taken. The line returns to the starting point, dispersing quietly. There is no, "well, that was nice," or "see you next walk." The practice has no need for commentary. You simply walked, mindfully, slowly. Now you carry that slowness back into whatever comes next. And in the monastery, next almost always involves cleaning something. If you ever thought sweeping was a chore, the monastery will gently, and by gently, I mean relentlessly, change your mind. Here, sweeping is not something to rush through so you can get back to the real work. Sweeping is the real work, or at least it is treated with the same seriousness as chanting or meditation. A monk's broom is not just a tool, it's an extension of mindfulness. The broom itself is usually simple, a fan of bound twigs or stiff bristles tied to a wooden handle. It is not ergonomic. It does not come with adjustable settings or a clever dust-catching system. Its only feature is that it works if you use it, which is rather the point. The task begins not with frantic brushing, but with standing still for a moment, broom in hand, and noticing the space before you. Sweeping is done slowly, deliberately, each movement tied to the breath. Step forward, sweep, inhale. Step forward again, sweep, exhale. The strokes are light but steady, guiding dust and fallen leaves into small, neat piles. You do not chase every speck. You simply guide the debris toward a destination, knowing that even as you do, the wind will bring more. In the monastery, sweeping is not about getting it done, but about being fully present with the act of doing it. The crunch of bristles on stone, the whisper of dust shifting, the soft scrape of leaves. These become your chant, your mantra. If your mind drifts to other things, a memory, a plan, the hope of breakfast, you notice and you bring it back to the sweep of the broom. There is also an element of service. You sweep not just for yourself, but for the community, for the visitors who will walk these paths, for the quiet dignity of the monastery itself. The act clears more than just dust, it clears the mind. The floor is cleaner, yes, but you are lighter too, emptied of the restless energy that clings when you hurry through life. And sweeping outdoors carries its own lesson in impermanence. You might spend an hour clearing the courtyard only for the breeze to scatter new leaves across it moments later. You do not sigh or scowl. You sweep again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. The monastery does not keep score, and neither should you. When the work is finished, the broom is set neatly aside. No one claps you on the back or says, "Nice job on those stairs." You don't need that. The satisfaction comes from knowing that for the last stretch of time, you were completely present. The floor is clear, the air feels a little fresher, and your mind is as swept as the courtyard itself. In the monastery, words are treated like rare coins, used sparingly, with intention, and never for the sake of filling empty air. The rule of silence is not absolute, but it is the baseline. Conversations happen only when necessary, and even then, they are brief, practical, and usually delivered at the volume of a polite whisper. It is not that monks dislike speaking, it's that they have decided not to use speech as a way to avoid facing themselves. Daily life moves in a quiet rhythm. Meals are eaten in silence, chores are done in silence, walking from one building to another happens in silence. This silence is not awkward because it isn't a gap to be filled. It is the normal state of things, like the stillness between waves or the hush in a library where everyone has agreed not to be the first to break it. When you first arrive, silence can feel like a weight. You become hyper-aware of every sound you make. The shuffle of your feet, the creak of the floor, the thump of a bowl set down too firmly. You may even start rehearsing what you'll say when you are allowed to speak, as if silence were a kind of verbal drought you must prepare for. But after a while, something shifts. You stop waiting for your turn to talk. You stop measuring time by conversations. You start noticing details that used to slide by unnoticed. The way light moves across the floor, the pattern of wind in the trees, the sound of your own breathing. The irony is that when monks do break silence, they often do it in ways that return to silence almost immediately. A short exchange about a task, a few words of instruction from a senior monk, or the brief murmur of a chant before meditation. Speech arises, serves its purpose, and then disappears without lingering. There is no chatter, no rambling. You don't hear someone say, "While I'm here, I might as well tell you about my cousin's trip to Chiang Mai." Words are for what is needed, nothing more. The silence isn't about being somber either. Monks laugh, just not loudly or often. They smile in greeting, bow in thanks, communicate with small gestures and eye contact. The absence of constant speech doesn't make the place cold, it makes it clear. Without the constant noise of commentary, life feels less cluttered. You begin to see that most words we speak outside the monastery are just filler. And perhaps the most surprising thing, silence begins to follow you. When the day's duties are done and you find yourself alone, you don't rush to fill the air with music, humming, or muttered thoughts. You simply let the quiet remain. The rule of silence isn't just about keeping the monastery calm. It's about showing you that silence was never empty in the first place. It was always full, you just hadn't been listening. If you've ever taken a class where the teacher moved so slowly you thought time itself might be holding its breath, you have the perfect preparation for scripture study in a Buddhist monastery. This is not speed reading. This is not a book club that aims to get through the text. This is more like watching a glacier inch its way down a mountain, except the glacier might actually be faster. The scriptures, or sutras, are ancient texts preserved for centuries in languages most people no longer speak outside of chanting. Pali, Sanskrit, Chinese, the sound alone feels like you've stepped into a different era. Each syllable carries the weight of generations who recited it before you, which is partly why no one is in a hurry. The words are not just to be read, they are to be absorbed. Study often happens in a plain room lined with low shelves holding bundles of scriptures wrapped in cloth. Monks sit on cushions with the text spread before them, sometimes in book form, sometimes in long, folded scrolls. The teacher, usually a senior monk with decades of practice, begins by reading aloud, slowly, carefully. Each phrase is followed by a pause so long you might think he's lost his place. He hasn't. He's letting the meaning settle, like tea leaves sinking to the bottom of a cup. The discussion that follows is equally unhurried. A single passage might be examined for an hour, or for several sessions across multiple days. Questions are asked, answers are given, and then both are examined again, as if to make sure no corner of the thought has been left unturned. It's not about finding a definitive answer. Often the point is to live with the question. If you're used to modern learning, where progress is measured in chapters completed or notes filled, this can feel maddening at first. You may find yourself thinking, we've been here for 40 minutes and we're still on the first line. But in the monastery that's considered a good pace. Rushing would be like gulping a fine tea before you've even smelled it. The deeper truth is that the scriptures are not just information, they are a mirror. As you read, they reflect your mind back at you. Your impatience, your distraction, your small victories of understanding. Studying slowly forces you to meet yourself as you are. When the session ends, there is no homework in the usual sense. You carry the passage with you into the day, letting it work on you while you sweep, chant, or simply walk. The lesson continues in silence, in the rhythm of your own mind. In the outside world, reading a book is often a way to get somewhere else, to the end of the story, to the conclusion, to the next thing. In the monastery, scripture study is a way to stay exactly where you are, only seeing it more clearly. And in that sense, the glacial pace is perfect. When the day's work pauses and the cushions are laid out in careful rows, it's time for one of the monastery's most anticipated and least predictable events, the Master's Dharma Talk. This is not a TED Talk. There are no slides, no bullet points, and certainly no 3 key takeaways. It is a teaching that flows according to the Master's mood, the needs of the moment, and sometimes, it seems, the weather. The hall fills quietly. Monks and novices sit cross-legged, eyes lowered, waiting for the soft shuffle of the Master's footsteps. He arrives without hurry, his robe swaying in time with each measured step, and takes his seat at the front. There is a pause, long enough for the air itself to seem to settle, before he begins. The opening words are often familiar. He might recite a short verse from the sutras, or a proverb everyone in the room has heard dozens of times. But what follows is never quite the same. Sometimes the talk begins with a story, perhaps about a wandering monk in ancient China who carried water buckets up a mountain every day, or a fisherman who found enlightenment while mending his nets. Other times, it begins with a question so direct it cuts through the room like a clean blade. What is this moment? The Dharma talk is not a lecture to be passively absorbed. It is more like a slow rain that seeps into the soil of your mind. The Master may speak in parables, weaving together images of rivers, lanterns, and falling leaves to point toward a truth that can't be stated outright. At times, the meaning feels crystal clear. At other times, you wonder if you missed something vital. And perhaps you did. But in the monastery, missing the point can be the point. Pauses punctuate the talk, long pauses so complete you might think it's over, only for the Master to resume with a single sentence that reframes everything. These silences are part of the teaching, inviting you to stop filling the space with your own chatter and simply let the words echo. The talk might last 20 minutes or nearly an hour. No one checks the time. There is no schedule to stick to here. There is only the unfolding of the teaching. Near the end, the Master often returns to where he began, repeating the opening verse or question. Now, though, it feels different. Not because the words have changed, but because you have been sitting with them. When it is finished, there is no applause, no follow-up discussion. The Master bows, the monks bow in return, and the room empties in the same silence it began with. Later, you might find a phrase from the talk returning to you while you sweep the courtyard or drink your tea. The Dharma talk is like a seed, planted quietly, left to grow on its own time. Every so often, after a Dharma talk, the Master will open the floor for questions. This sounds straightforward until you remember that in the monastery, straightforward is rarely how things go. A question here is not an invitation to get a neat packaged answer. It's an invitation to start wandering in a slightly different kind of fog. The hall remains as still as during the talk. Monks sit with their hands folded in their laps, waiting for someone to begin. A brave novice might bow slightly and ask something earnest, like, "How can I stop my mind from wandering during meditation?" In a classroom, this would lead to a clear explanation about focus techniques or breathing exercises. In the monastery, it might get you a smile, a long pause, and then, where is your mind when it wanders? This is the rhythm of question time. You bring what feels like a practical problem. The Master hands it back to you wrapped in mystery. Sometimes the reply is a parable about 2 monks arguing over a flag in the wind. Sometimes it's just a single word, look, spoken in a way that makes you feel both seen and slightly confused. It is not that the Master refuses to answer. It's that he refuses to answer for you. His role is not to give you solutions, but to point you toward the place where you might discover them yourself. The real teaching is hidden in the act of looking, not in the satisfaction of knowing. Some exchanges take on the air of a gentle duel. A question about fear might lead to the Master asking, "Who is afraid?" The questioner might try to answer, only to have each answer dismantled with another question. This can go on for several rounds until both question and answer dissolve into shared laughter. or into a silence that somehow feels complete. Occasionally, the question time takes an unexpected turn. Someone might ask something deeply personal, and the master will respond with a story that seems unrelated until hours later you realize it was exactly what you needed to hear, or he might simply redirect you. Keep sitting. The question will take care of itself. To an outsider, this could all seem evasive, even frustrating. But in the monastery, it's understood that real questions rarely have real answers in the way we expect. They have directions, hints, openings, not conclusions. When the session ends, you leave not with a list of solutions, but with a handful of small riddles, each one quietly working its way into your mind like a seed in soft soil. Later, sweeping the courtyard or walking to evening chanting, you might find that one of them has started to sprout. Here, answers are less important than the space they leave behind, a space you must learn to live in without rushing to fill it. In the monastery, there are no printers humming in the corner, no photocopiers spitting out stacks of fresh scripture. When a sutra needs to be copied, it is done the same way it has been done for centuries, by hand, one deliberate stroke at a time. Writing sutras is not a chore, it is a practice, equal in importance to chanting or meditation. It is meditation with ink. The materials are simple but treated with care. A low table, a sheet of clean paper, a calligraphy brush, and a small block of ink. The ink is not poured from a bottle. It is made fresh each time by grinding the block against an inkstone with a slow, circular motion, adding just enough water until the liquid turns deep black and smooth. The grinding itself is a prelude to the work, rhythmic, steady, already beginning to still the mind. When the ink is ready, you take the brush. Holding it upright, you touch the tip to the paper with the gentleness of placing a leaf on water. The first character forms slowly, carefully. It must be balanced, precise, yet alive. This is not a race to finish a page. This is about being fully present for each stroke, each curve, each pause before the brush lifts away. Copying a sutra this way is an exercise in patience. A single page can take an hour or more. The room is silent except for the faint sound of brush on paper and the occasional soft tap when the brush is rinsed. Every few moments, you stop to re-ink, taking that moment as part of the practice rather than a break from it. Mistakes are not erased here. If a stroke is too heavy or a line wavers, it stays. The imperfection becomes part of the work, a reminder that the point is not flawless calligraphy, but a steady mind. The sutra does not need to be perfect to carry its meaning, neither do you. There is also a sense of offering in the work. Writing a sutra is not for personal display. In fact, your finished sheet may be stored away, burned in a ceremonial fire, or placed quietly on an altar. The act of writing is the gift, not the finished product. Hours pass unnoticed in this way. The sutra unfolds character by character, and with it, your awareness. There is no rush to finish because there is no finished in the usual sense. Even when the last character is complete, the practice lingers. In the ink still staining your fingertips, in the brush now resting quietly on the table, in the way your breath has slowed without you noticing. In a world where copying something usually takes seconds, the monastery insists on making it take hours. It's not an accident. The slow work of the hand is the slow work of the heart. If the idea of a debate makes you picture two people leaning over a podium, armed with note cards, determined to crush their opponent with logic, forget all that. In the monastery, debates are not about defeating someone. They are about sharpening understanding, testing insight, and occasionally enjoying a bit of theatrical back and forth that somehow remains free of ego, at least in theory. The debating ground is usually an open courtyard or a covered walkway. Monks gather in pairs or small groups. One takes the role of questioner, the other the responder. The questioner poses a challenge, sometimes about a fine point of doctrine, sometimes about an example from everyday life. If all things are impermanent, then is impermanence itself impermanent? The kind of question that can make your head tilt slightly to one side as if hoping the answer will fall out. In some traditions, the questioner will punctuate each question with a sudden clap of the hands, a sharp sound that startles the air and focuses attention. The responder must answer quickly, directly, without getting lost in a fog of half-thoughts. There's an energy to it. Not aggressive, but alive, like a game played in slow motion with occasional bursts of speed. The point is not to trap the other monk or win a rhetorical victory. The point is to push each other deeper into the Dharma, into the subtle and sometimes paradoxical truths it contains. Answers can be straightforward, but they can also be deliberately unsettling. A question about the self might be answered with, "Show me where it is," sending the questioner on an entirely different line of inquiry. It's not unusual for a debate to end in laughter. Someone asks a perfectly serious question. The answer comes in the form of a single word, a gesture, or a simple "I don't know." And that is acceptable here. Admitting not knowing is not failure, it is honesty. The spectators, other monks listening from the edges, aren't here to keep score. They're watching for clarity, for insight, for those moments when a familiar teaching suddenly shows itself in a new light. They are also watching for the signs of attachment, too much pride in an answer, too much frustration in a question. In those moments, the debate itself becomes the teaching. By the end, there's no declaration of who won. The conversation dissolves into nods, maybe a bow, and everyone returns to their duties. Later, you might see the same pair sweeping side by side, or eating in silence, their earlier exchange folded neatly into the ongoing rhythm of monastic life. In the world outside, debates often end with someone walking away triumphant and someone else feeling defeated. In the monastery, the only victory worth having is shared, the quiet moment when both people see something more clearly than before. And then, as with most things here, you bow, you smile, and you let it go. Bathing in a monastery is not the long, luxurious soak of a scented bubble bath. There is no steaming tub, no cloud of lavender, no playlist of calming flute music. Bathing here is simple, functional, and, depending on the season, occasionally bracing enough to make you question your life choices. The facilities vary by monastery, but in most traditional settings, you will not find a private shower with endless hot water. Instead, there might be a communal washing area, a tiled room with a row of taps or buckets, sometimes with partitions, sometimes without. Privacy is minimal. Comfort is optional. Efficiency is non-negotiable. Water is often cold, or at best, tepid. If you are lucky enough to have warm water, it comes in small quantities, and only after some effort to heat it. In colder climates, the first splash can be an instant lesson in impermanence. Whatever comfort you had a moment ago has completely vanished. You quickly learn that hesitation only makes it worse. Bathing is done in stages. First, you fill a small bucket or basin and pour the water over yourself, letting it run down your skin. There is no aimless standing under a steady stream. Every drop is purposeful. Then you soap up quickly, plain soap, unscented, the kind that cleans without announcing itself. Finally, you rinse in the same measured way you began, careful not to splash more than you need. In some monasteries, bathing is timed so that everyone has their turn. You learn to work within your allotted minutes. Lingering isn't frowned upon exactly. It's just that there's no reason for it. Bathing is not a retreat from the day, it is part of the day, and the day here keeps moving. This simplicity serves a purpose. Bathing like a monk teaches you to strip away the extras, to see the act for what it is. The necessary cleaning of the body, nothing more, nothing less. You notice how easily daily routines outside the monastery become padded with little luxuries, the extra 10 minutes under hot water, the scented lotion, the perfect towel. Here, those things fall away, and somehow the essential act remains enough. There is also an unspoken mindfulness in the practice. You are aware of the water, of your skin, of the way the air feels against you as you dry off. You handle your towel with the same quiet care you would give to folding your robe. Everything is done without rush, yet without indulgence. When you leave the washing area, your hair, or what's left of it, is damp. Your robe clings slightly to your skin, and the cool air feels sharper. You are clean, but more importantly, you are reminded that even in the smallest acts, there is a way to do them simply, completely, and without excess. In the outside world, skipping breakfast is considered extreme. Skipping dinner is practically unthinkable. But in the monastery, eating only once a day is not a challenge. It's the norm. The meal is taken before noon, and once the bowls are washed, that's it. No late-night snacks, no just a little fruit before bed, no sneaking into the kitchen for a spoonful of peanut butter. The discipline is as much mental as it is physical. The logic is simple. Fewer meals mean less time spent on cooking, serving, and cleaning, leaving more time for practice. It also keeps the body light, reducing the sluggishness that can follow heavy eating. But simplicity does not make it easy. The first few days, your mind will obsess over food, as if it's plotting a coup. You'll imagine steaming bowls of noodles, buttery toast, slices of cake. The trick is learning to let those thoughts pass, much like in meditation, without chasing after them. The single daily meal is approached with care. It is not grabbed quickly between tasks, but taken in the same deliberate silence as all other meals. You eat mindfully, not because it's trendy, but because you know there will be no second round. Every bite matters. You notice the texture of the rice, the faint sweetness of a piece of pumpkin, the crisp snap of a bean. You chew slowly, not to make the meal last longer, but because it feels right to meet each bite with full attention. Hunger, too, becomes part of the practice. It shifts from being an inconvenience to being a teacher. You learn that hunger is not an emergency. It rises, it lingers, it fades. By evening, the sensation may still be there, but it has softened, no longer shouting for your attention. You begin to see how much of eating outside the monastery is about habit, boredom, or the simple availability of food, rather than true need. There is also a certain freedom in the rhythm. Without the cycle of planning, preparing, and eating 3 meals a day, your hours open up. The belly is not constantly negotiating with the mind over what comes next. The mind, in turn, has one less anchor pulling it toward distraction. In time, the once daily meal stops feeling like deprivation. It becomes a natural part of the day's structure, as normal as morning chanting or sweeping the courtyard. The body adapts, the mind adjusts. And when you finally do eat, the food tastes sharper, clearer, as if your senses have been tuned in by the long pause. You discover that you can live on less than you thought, and not just survive, but live well. And in the monastery, that lesson applies to far more than food. In the modern world, going barefoot is usually reserved for beaches, yoga studios, or the brief shuffle from your bed to the bathroom in the middle of the night. In the monastery, it is simply how you move through most of life. The practice is not about fashion, rebellion, or proving toughness. It's about grounding, quite literally, in every step. Monks walk barefoot during the morning alms rounds, in the meditation hall, and often around the monastery grounds. The first thing you notice is the texture. Grass feels soft but uneven. Stone pathways are cool in the early morning, almost icy in winter. Dirt paths are warm and slightly gritty. You become aware of the ground the way you never are in shoes, each surface carrying its own quiet message. Barefoot walking also slows you down. Without the protective bubble of a sole, every step is considered, measured. You look where you place your foot. You notice small obstacles, a pebble, a twig, a patch of damp earth. You are in constant conversation with the ground, adjusting your stride, sensing changes in temperature, texture, and slope. There is a symbolic dimension, too. Going barefoot is a reminder of humility. Shoes create a barrier between you and the earth. Bare feet return you to direct contact. It is a physical expression of the monastic vow to live simply, without unnecessary protection or adornment. You walk as people have walked for most of human history, uninsulated from the real nature of the world beneath you. There are practical lessons hidden in the discomfort. Stepping on a small stone is a quick lesson in mindfulness. A muddy path teaches acceptance. The occasional ant crossing your toes reminds you that you are part of a larger web of life, and that you should step carefully. In the outside world, people talk about staying grounded as a metaphor. In the monastery, it's not a metaphor, it's your daily reality. Of course, there are moments when barefoot walking feels less like a spiritual exercise and more like a test of endurance. Gravel driveways under the midday sun, frostbitten grass in the early dawn. But these moments too become teachers. They remind you that life will not always smooth the path for your comfort, and yet you can still walk it. Over time, your feet adapt. The skin thickens slightly, small calluses forming like natural armor. You stop wincing at minor discomforts. You start feeling the ground not as an obstacle, but as a companion. Sometimes soft, sometimes rough, always present. And perhaps the most surprising thing is that when you do put on shoes, they feel strange, almost unnecessary. You miss the connection, the directness, the silent dialogue between you and the earth. In the monastery, walking barefoot isn't just a way to move, it's a way to remember where you stand. In the monastery, prayer beads are not jewelry. They're not an accessory to match your robe or a subtle statement of faith you keep in your pocket for when you feel pious. They are a tool, simple, repetitive, and quietly powerful, used to keep the mind steady while the body moves or rests. A monk's prayer beads, called a mala, usually have 108 beads. This is not an arbitrary number. It carries symbolic weight in Buddhist tradition, representing the countless defilements of the mind that must be worked through. But the beads are not for counting sins like tally marks on a chalkboard. They are a way to track the steady rhythm of a mantra, one repetition for each bead, until the circle is complete. The beads are often made from wood, sandalwood, bodhi seed, or other natural materials. They're light in the hand, but textured enough to feel each one distinctly. Some malas are smooth and polished from years of use. Others are still slightly rough, edges softening with time and handling. Using them is simple. You hold the mala in your right hand, or left, depending on tradition, between thumb and middle finger, never letting it dangle carelessly. The index finger, considered the finger of ego, is usually kept out of the loop. You begin at the bead next to the guru bead, the slightly larger or differently shaped bead that marks the start and end of the cycle. Each bead is moved along the cord as you recite your chosen mantra. The mantra can be in Pali, Sanskrit, or your own language, depending on the tradition. It might be something as well known as Om Mani Padme Hum, or a single syllable like Buddha. What matters is not the language, but the repetition. The sound becomes a current, carrying you forward, bead by bead, through the circle. The act is both physical and mental. Your fingers move steadily, your lips may move softly or remain still, your breath falls into rhythm. Distractions still come, they always do, but the beads give the mind a home, a small tactile anchor in the present moment. When you reach the guru bead, you don't pass over it. Instead, you turn the mala around and go the other way, as if respecting a boundary. This turning itself becomes part of the ritual, a quiet bow within the practice. Some monks use the beads while sitting, others while walking or even sweeping. The rhythm fits anywhere in the day. Over time, the mala absorbs the faint scent of the hands that use it, the oils of the skin, the memory of thousands of mantras whispered into its silence. It is called the prayer beads loop for a reason. You return to it again and again, not to finish anything, but to keep the circle moving, the same way the practice itself keeps moving, quietly, without end. Entering a Buddhist temple is not like walking into a public building. You don't simply push open the door, stroll in, and find a comfortable seat. Every movement inside is part of the practice, whether you are a visiting layperson or a lifelong monk. The etiquette is not just about showing respect to the Buddha image at the front, it's about moving through the space as if it matters, because here, it does. The first thing you do is remove your shoes. Always. Even if you're just stepping inside for a few seconds. The temple floor is not a place for the dust and dirt of the outside world. Bare feet or socks only. If your socks have holes, you suddenly become very aware of them. When you enter, you don't march straight up the central aisle. You step quietly, preferably to the side, eyes lowered slightly. You are not here to be the main attraction. The Buddha image at the front of the hall is treated like a living presence. You never turn your back to it casually. If you must move in a way that faces away, you do so discreetly, often with a small bow first. Bowing is central to temple etiquette. In many traditions you bow 3 times upon entering, once for the Buddha, once for the Dharma, the teachings, and once for the Sangha, the community of practitioners. These are not hurried nods, but full, deliberate gestures, kneeling, placing your forehead to the floor, hands pressed together. A physical acknowledgement that you are part of something larger than yourself. Seating is also an unspoken art. Monks sit toward the front in order of seniority, with newer monks behind. Visitors stay toward the back or to the side unless invited forward. You don't plop down cross-legged like you're at a picnic. You sit neatly, either in a meditative posture or with your legs folded to the side, keeping your feet from pointing at the altar. Pointing feet at sacred objects is considered impolite, a detail that quickly becomes second nature once you've been corrected a few times. The temple is a place of quiet. Whispering is rare, and even then it's soft and purposeful. Phones, of course, are out of the question. The most you'll hear is the soft rustle of robes, the creak of floorboards, or the low, rhythmic hum of chanting. Even your exit follows a pattern. You bow again toward the altar before leaving. You step backward a few paces before turning, a subtle way of showing you don't walk away casually from what's sacred. To an outsider, all of this might seem rigid or overly formal, but to those who live it, the etiquette is not about rules for their own sake. It is about presence, moving with awareness, treating the space and the beings in it as worthy of your full attention, and in that way the temple teaches you without saying a word. In most professions, staying in one place for 3 months might be considered routine. In the life of a Buddhist monk, it's a seasonal commitment with centuries of tradition behind it. The rains retreat, known in Pali as vassa, is a time when the monastic community agrees, formally and without loopholes, to stay put. No long-distance travel, no wandering from monastery to monastery, no extended journeys into town. For a full quarter of the year, the monks dig in, figuratively speaking, and practice from one location. The origins are practical. In the Buddha's time, monks travelled constantly, teaching and meditating in forests, mountains, and villages. But during the rainy season in India, the roads turned to mud and the fields became planting grounds. Villagers complained that wandering monks trampled the crops and disrupted farming. So a rule was made: during the rains, stay in one place. What began as a seasonal courtesy became a formal tradition, and a surprisingly rich period of practice. The retreat begins with a ceremony. Monks gather in the ordination hall and recite the ancient vows of residence. It's not a dramatic declaration, but it sets the tone. For the next 3 months, this temple is home. There's a subtle shift in atmosphere. Without the possibility of packing up and moving on, the community settles more deeply into its rhythm. Daily life during Rain's retreat doesn't look dramatically different on the surface. There's still morning chanting, meditation, arms round, study, and chores. But there's a quiet intensification. Fewer comings and goings mean fewer disruptions. Study periods lengthen. Meditation sessions deepen. Tasks are done with a little more care because there is time. It's also a season of teaching. Lay people often take this time to visit the monastery more regularly, attending talks or bringing offerings to support the monks. In some countries, the Rains retreat is a social marker, a time when people renew their own commitments to practice, perhaps taking temporary vows or joining the monks for short stays. Yet, for all its structure, the retreat can also be subtly challenging. Staying put means facing whatever arises without distraction. You can't run from boredom by changing scenery. You can't avoid certain personalities in the community by disappearing for a week. The same faces, the same walls, the same routine. They become mirrors, reflecting back whatever the mind would rather not see. When the 3 months end, there is a closing ceremony called pavarana, where monks invite feedback from one another on their conduct during the retreat. It's not about pointing fingers, but about refining practice, a final gesture of openness before travel resumes. For some, the end of the Rains retreat brings relief. For others, it brings a quiet sadness, as the stillness of the season gives way to the movement of the wider world again. Either way, the lesson lingers. Sometimes the deepest journey is the one where you don't move at all. In most places, a festival means noise, music, shouting, clapping, the occasional explosion of fireworks in the night sky. In the monastery, a festival can arrive and pass without a single firecracker, and yet everyone knows it happened. The celebrations here are quieter, but no less meaningful. and they are always wrapped in ritual rather than spectacle. Many Buddhist festivals mark important events in the life of the Buddha, his birth, enlightenment, first sermon, or passing into parinirvana. Others celebrate milestones in the monastic year, like the start or end of the rain's retreat. While the details vary from country to country, the monastery's way of observing them shares a common thread: stillness first, ceremony second, festivity last. On a festival morning, the temple is cleaned more thoroughly than usual, not that it's ever messy. Floors are swept twice, altars dusted until they shine, flowers refreshed, and incense laid out neatly. The Buddha image at the center of the hall might be draped with fresh cloth or adorned with garlands. There's an unmistakable feeling of readiness in the air, but no frantic last-minute rushing. The day often begins with chanting, longer and more elaborate than usual. Sutras are recited in a slow, steady rhythm that fills the hall, the words echoing off the wooden beams. Lay people may gather outside, some dressed in white as a sign of devotion. Offerings arrive in steady streams: bowls of rice, baskets of fruit, flowers, candles, packets of tea. These are arranged with quiet care, becoming part of the temple's landscape for the day. There may be a Dharma talk, delivered with the same unhurried pace as always, though often tailored to the significance of the day. The teachings might reflect on the Buddha's compassion, the impermanence of life, or the qualities of a virtuous mind. No one checks a program to see what's next. The schedule unfolds like everything else here, slowly, without a stopwatch. Meals on festival days can be more generous. The community's offerings may include dishes not seen on ordinary mornings, sweet sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, special vegetable curries, even small treats made just for the occasion. But there's no feasting in the Western sense. The monks eat mindfully, in silence, as they always do, receiving each bite as an offering rather than a reward. Sometimes, after the formal ceremonies, the mood shifts gently. Lay visitors may linger, chatting quietly with each other or offering respectful greetings to the monks. Children, freed from the hush of the temple hall, play in the courtyard. Still, the volume never rises to a roar. Even joy here has a kind of spacious calm. By sunset, the temple is quiet again. The flowers remain, the scent of incense still lingers, and a faint echo of chanting seems to rest in the air. The festival has come and gone without fireworks, but it leaves behind something subtler, the kind of celebration you carry in your chest rather than in your ears. If the monastery had a big day, ordination would be it. Not in the sense of confetti and champagne, but in the sense of a life quietly turning in an entirely new direction, and doing so in front of everyone. Ordination is both a personal vow and a public declaration. You are not just telling yourself you will live as a monk. You are telling the community, the Sangha, and anyone watching that you intend to walk this path from this day forward. The preparation begins long before the ceremony. Hair must be shaved, completely, without missing a single stubborn patch, and robes fitted. The soon-to-be monk often spends days studying the chants and formal responses required for the ceremony, practicing the sequence of bows, the phrasing of vows, and the way to hold himself throughout. Every movement has a place. On the morning of the ordination, the temple is filled with a quiet sense of occasion. Lay people gather early, some to witness, some to participate by offering robes or alms. The candidate, dressed in plain white, walks slowly into the temple grounds, surrounded by family, friends, and often a few older monks who will serve as mentors. There is no rush. Everything is done in deliberate, unhurried steps, as if the day itself knows it is too important to be hurried. The first part of the ceremony is symbolic, the offering of robes. The candidate kneels before the abbot or presiding elder, presenting the folded robes with both hands, head bowed. This gesture is as much about humility as it is about clothing. The robes represent the choice to step away from lay life and into the discipline of the Sangha. Next comes the formal request to be accepted into the order. This is not a casual "sign me up." It is a scripted exchange in which the candidate recites his intention, affirms his understanding of the precepts, and asks, 3 times, to be allowed into the monastic life. The repetition is not for dramatic effect. It is tradition. a way of showing the request is not made lightly. Senior monks question the candidate on basic matters: his health, his freedom from debts or obligations, his understanding of the vows he is about to take. The questions are practical, but they also carry a quiet weight. Are you truly ready to live this life? Finally, the robes are put on. The white clothing is set aside. The saffron or maroon folds are wrapped and tied. This moment changes nothing physically. The same person stands there, yet changes everything symbolically. The chanting rises, blessings are given, and the new monk bows deeply, palms pressed together. When the ceremony ends, there is no applause. The new monk simply joins the line of his brothers, moving as they move, sitting where they sit. The transformation is complete, not in fanfare, but in the quiet step into the daily rhythm that will now shape the rest of his life. In the monastery, giving is not casual. It is not the hurried handing over of something while thinking about your next appointment. It is a ceremony, and like all ceremonies here, it unfolds with deliberate slowness. The ceremony of offering is a quiet, wordless exchange in which the giver, the receiver, and the gift itself are treated as sacred. The setting is simple, a small altar space or an open hall. The layperson, often dressed in white as a sign of purity and devotion, kneels or stands before the monks. The offering might be food, robes, candles, incense, or other items needed for the life of the monastery. No gift is too small. A single candle is received with the same grace as a week's worth of rice. The act begins with the giver placing the offering on a low table or directly into the hands of a monk. Eye contact is minimal, not out of coldness, but because the focus is on the act itself, not the personalities involved. Hands are pressed together in a gesture of respect, and the monk responds with the same. There is a stillness that surrounds this moment. No chatter, no commentary about the weather or the quality of the mangoes being offered. It is not a transaction. It is a ritual acknowledgement of interdependence. Monks depend entirely on these offerings for their sustenance and supplies. Lay people, in turn, see the offering as a way to cultivate generosity, earn merit, and support the preservation of the Dharma. After the physical act of giving, the monks often chant a short blessing. The sound is low and steady, wrapping the giver and the gift in a vibration that feels older than memory. This is not a thank you in the ordinary sense. It is a dedication, an expression of gratitude that flows beyond the individual to all beings. The blessing often includes wishes for the giver's health, happiness, and spiritual progress. Sometimes the offering happens in a formal gathering. Other times it is more intimate, just a single layperson kneeling before a single monk. But even in its smallest form, the stillness remains. There is no rush to conclude, no quick "thanks, see you tomorrow." The ceremony has its own natural pace, and it ends only when it feels complete. For the monks, receiving in this way is a practice in itself. It is a reminder to accept with humility, without greed or judgment, and to treat every gift, even a small one, as essential. For the layperson, it is a practice in letting go, giving without expecting praise or recognition. When it is over, both giver and receiver bow. The offering is placed carefully in its proper place, and the hall returns to its usual quiet. Yet something has shifted. In that still shared moment, both sides have participated in the same lesson, that giving and receiving are not separate acts, but two parts of the same whole. In the monastery, death is not hidden away. It is not wrapped in euphemisms or avoided in conversation. It is acknowledged as a fact of existence, one of the few absolute certainties in life. Memorial rites are the way the monastic community and the lay people who support it pause to honour those who have died while also reflecting on the impermanence of all things. The setting is quiet, stripped of theatrical grief. In the main hall, an altar is arranged with a photograph of the deceased, if available, candles, incense, and offerings of flowers or fruit. A bowl of water with a single floating blossom might be placed nearby, a symbol of beauty that cannot last. Everything is arranged with deliberate care, but nothing feels ornamental for its own sake. The monks enter in silence and take their seats in neat rows. The ceremony begins with chanting, long, low, resonant verses from the sutras. These are not prayers in the sense of asking for intervention. They are recitations of the Dharma, offered as guidance for the departed and as a reminder to the living. The rhythm of the chant is steady, almost hypnotic, inviting everyone present into the same still current. Laypeople may sit behind the monks, heads bowed, hands pressed together. Some close their eyes, letting the sound carry them. Others watch the altar, the smoke from the incense curling upward like a quiet messenger. In this space, grief is allowed, but it is not the center of attention. The teaching takes precedence. All things arise, all things pass. There may be moments in the service when a monk pours water slowly into a vessel until it overflows into a bowl. The act is done without words, a visual expression of merit being poured toward the deceased. In Buddhist understanding, the good deeds of the living can be dedicated to benefit others, even those who have passed on. Offerings are presented often by family members, rice, robes for the monks, or other practical items. These are accepted with the same formal care as any gift to the Sangha, a way of honouring the departed through generosity rather than through display. The giving itself becomes part of the memorial. At the close of the rite, the chanting shifts into blessings for all beings. The name of the deceased may be spoken, but it is framed within a wish for liberation for everyone, not just one soul. This universality is intentional. Death is not a private event, but part of the shared fabric of life. When the ceremony ends, there is no dramatic conclusion. People rise slowly, bow to the altar, and file out quietly. The offerings remain for a time, the incense burns itself down, and the hall returns to its usual silence. In the monastery, memorial rites are not about clinging to the memory of the person who has gone. They are about acknowledging the truth they have just lived through, the truth that is waiting, quietly, for us all. In the monastery, a monk's role is not confined to chanting, meditating, and sweeping leaves into neat little piles. At some point, he becomes a teacher, not necessarily because he sought the title, but because others naturally turn to him for guidance. Teaching here is not about lecturing from a high pulpit or delivering polished speeches. It is about meeting people where they are, often in ways that are quieter and less formal than you might expect. The teaching may take the form of a Dharma talk in the main hall, the kind that unfolds slowly, like a stream finding its way through stones. But just as often, it happens informally, while walking in the garden with a novice, over a cup of tea with a lay visitor, or in response to a question whispered after morning chanting. In these moments, the monk's role is less about giving answers and more about helping others see their own questions more clearly. A good monastic teacher does not rush. He listens. He lets silences stretch, not as a tactic, but because he knows clarity often rises in the space between words. When he does speak, his sentences are simple but layered. He may use an image from nature, a tree bending in the wind, a drop of water falling into a pond, to illustrate a truth about patience, impermanence, or letting go. Not all teaching is verbal. Sometimes the lesson is in the way the monk moves through his day, how he accepts a poorly cooked meal with the same gratitude as a feast, how he sweeps the same path every morning without complaint, even when the wind scatters the leaves again. The consistency of action becomes a kind of living scripture, quietly instructing anyone who pays attention. When teaching novices, patience is essential. The younger monks will forget their lines during chanting, trip over their robes, or ask the same question 3 different ways. The older monk does not scold, at least not harshly. He corrects gently, sometimes with humour, always with the understanding that he too once made the same mistakes. The aim is not to create perfect monks overnight, but to plant seeds that will grow over a lifetime. For laypeople, the monk's role as teacher can be even more varied. He may lead meditation sessions, explain the meaning of a ritual, or help someone navigate personal difficulties through the lens of the Dharma. Occasionally, he may tell a story that appears unrelated to the problem at hand, a fisherman's tale, a memory from his novice days, only for the listener to realize later that the story was the answer all along. Teaching in the monastery is less about authority and more about service. The monk does not teach to be admired. He teaches because passing on the Dharma is part of his vow. And just as he teaches, he continues to learn, from his own teachers, from the novices, and from the endless, patient lessons of the path itself. The monastery may seem like a quiet world set apart, but its doors are not closed to the outside. Villagers come and go, sometimes for festivals, sometimes to offer food, and sometimes because they need advice. And when they do, the monks become something more than caretakers of the Dharma. They become counselors, mediators, and, occasionally, reluctant problem solvers. The requests for counsel range from the deeply personal to the politely vague. One villager might ask about the Buddhist perspective on illness, another about raising children, another about the right way to handle a quarrel with a stubborn neighbour. In a culture where monks are respected as moral guides, the range of questions can be astonishing. Some are simple. Should I take this job? Others are tangled with years of history. How do I forgive someone who has never apologized? The meeting might take place in the temple hall, in the shade of a tree in the courtyard, or even on the steps outside the dining area. The monk listens first, always listens. The villager speaks, sometimes haltingly, sometimes in a rush, as if afraid they might lose courage. The monk nods occasionally, but does not interrupt. In this space, the act of speaking is often as important as the advice that follows. When the monk does respond, it is rarely with direct instructions. He does not hand out top 10 solutions or tell people what they want to hear. Instead, he offers perspectives, gently reframing the problem through the lens of impermanence, compassion, or cause and effect. He might tell a short story from the Buddha's life, or a parable involving animals and unlikely coincidences. These stories are never random. They are shaped to lead the listener towards seeing their own situation in a different light. Sometimes the counsel is practical. A quarrel in the village might be eased with a suggestion to meet halfway, to share work or food, to let go of the need to be completely right. Sometimes it is philosophical, a reminder that grasping too tightly at what we want often causes the very suffering we're trying to avoid. And sometimes the advice is simply to be patient, to let the tangle loosen on its own. The monk does not expect instant transformation. He knows that advice, like seeds, takes time to take root. Some villagers return months later to say thank you. Others disappear into the rhythm of their lives, perhaps never thinking of the conversation again, or perhaps carrying it quietly in the background. Counsel for the villagers is not about solving every problem. It is about offering a mirror that reflects both the difficulty and the path beyond it. For the monk, it is another form of service, not separate from sweeping the courtyard or chanting at dawn, but part of the same work of tending to the human heart. In the monastery, blessings are not confined to temples, altars, or ceremonial halls. Sometimes the work of a monk takes place under the open sky, in the company of soil, water, and growing things. Blessing the fields is one of those traditions, a way for the Sangha to honour the land, the farmers, and the cycle of life that sustains everyone, monks included. It often begins with an invitation from the village. A farmer will come to the monastery, bow respectfully, and ask the abbot or a senior monk to perform a blessing before planting or after harvesting. The request is not made lightly. Agriculture here is more than work. It is the lifeline of the community. And when so much depends on weather, timing, and soil, an extra layer of spiritual protection never hurts. On the chosen day, a small group of monks walks from the monastery to the fields, robes shifting with each step, alms bowls replaced by ceremonial items, incense, candles, a flask of water already blessed during chanting. Villagers often follow along, carrying offerings, bundles of flowers, trays of fruit, packets of rice. The walk itself feels like a procession, though it is marked by the same gentle quiet as any monastic outing. At the edge of the field, the monks take their places, usually on mats or low stools set beneath a tree or makeshift canopy. The ceremony begins with chanting, slow, resonant verses that rise and fall like the wind moving through the crops that are yet to sprout or already stand tall. The words call for protection, abundance, and harmony, not only for the plants, but for all who work the land. The central act of the blessing often involves sprinkling holy water, A monk dips a small branch or a bundle of grass into the water, then flicks it gently over the soil, over the farmer's tools, over the hands of those who will do the planting or harvesting. The droplets catch the light, tiny arcs that feel both humble and profound. Some ceremonies include walking the perimeter of the field, chanting continuously, as if wrapping the land in an invisible thread of protection. Others are simpler, a seated blessing, a short teaching on gratitude for the earth, a few quiet moments of reflection before work begins. For the monks, this is not about magic in the Western sense. It is about intention, aligning the work of human hands with respect for nature and the understanding that everything grows in interdependence. For the villagers, it is a reminder that farming is not just labor, but a partnership with forces larger than themselves. When the ceremony ends, there is no applause. The monks bow to the farmers bow to the monks, and the tools are picked up to begin the day's real work. Yet something lingers in the air, a shared sense that the land has been seen, honoured, and trusted to give again. Every so often, a monk will leave the stillness of the monastery and take to the road. This is not a holiday, and it is certainly not sightseeing. It is pilgrimage, a journey undertaken with the same intention as sitting on a cushion or chanting before dawn. The difference is that now the meditation moves through landscapes, villages, and the long stretch of road between them. Pilgrimage has deep roots in Buddhist tradition. Monks have always walked to sacred sites, the place of the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, first teaching, or passing. But it is not only about reaching a famous location. The act of walking itself is the practice, a moving meditation carried out step by mindful step. A monk on pilgrimage travels simply. A small cloth bag carries a robe, an alms bowl, and perhaps a few personal necessities. A water bottle, a string of prayer beads, a thin mat for sleeping. The road becomes both home and temple. There is no schedule to keep beyond the rhythm of sunrise and sunset. The walking is unhurried, even over long distances. Each step is placed with awareness, heel, sole, toes, the same way walking meditation is practiced in the monastery courtyard. The difference is that here the path is not perfectly swept stone, but dirt tracks, uneven village roads, sometimes the shoulder of a busy highway. Along the way, villagers often notice the passing monk and offer food or water. Sometimes they ask for blessings, sometimes they simply bow and continue with their day. These small exchanges become part of the journey, reminders that the pilgrimage is not a solitary act but woven into the fabric of the wider community. Nights are spent in temples, roadside shelters, or under the open sky. A mosquito net might be strung between two trees. A robe might serve as both blanket and pillow. The simplicity is deliberate. Every comfort removed is another opportunity to observe the mind's restless habits, its search for softness, warmth, familiarity, and to let those habits loosen. The destination, when it comes, is rarely the main point. Arriving at a sacred site, the monk will bow, perhaps sit in meditation, perhaps chant a few verses. The place is honoured, but the understanding is clear. The insight gained came not from standing here, but from the long, quiet miles that led here. When the pilgrimage ends and the monk returns to the monastery, he does not bring back souvenirs. He brings back the same practice he left with, only deeper, steadier, tested by sun, rain, dust, and the endless road. And perhaps he carries one more quiet truth, that every path, if walked with attention, is a pilgrimage, and every step, if taken with awareness, is already the destination. For most of the year, the monastery is its own quiet world, with its rhythms set by bells, chants, and the sweep of brooms. But inevitably, the outside world arrives at the gate, sometimes in the form of local visitors, sometimes in the form of tourists with cameras around their necks and guidebooks clutched like passports. And then, for a short while, two very different worlds overlap. The outsider might be a pilgrim, a curious traveller, a backpacker looking for authentic experiences, or someone who simply wandered in while exploring the area. The first thing they usually notice is the silence, or more accurately, the way the silence feels intentional. Even the birdsong seems woven into it. The second thing they notice is that monks move differently, as though time itself has agreed to slow down inside the gates. Interactions are guided by a kind of gentle choreography. Visitors are greeted with a nod or a soft smile, but rarely with an enthusiastic handshake. If questions come, they are answered with care, but also with brevity. Monks are not tour guides. They are hosts of a spiritual space, and their way of welcoming is to give you room to be still. Sometimes a visitor will ask about the life of a monk. The answers are honest, though not dressed up for dramatic effect. We wake early, we meditate, we work, we study, we rest. The simplicity can surprise those expecting mystical secrets. What they are hearing, of course, is the secret, that the extraordinary hides in the ordinary, if you are willing to stay with it long enough. Other visitors come with deeper curiosity, perhaps seeking advice or blessings. These exchanges are quieter still. The monk listens, speaks softly, and offers guidance that often sounds simple on the surface, but ripens in meaning later. There is also the category of visitor who comes armed with a camera, eager to capture the exotic life of the monastery. While monks are not hostile to this, they prefer when the camera is lowered in favour of the eyes. A photograph might capture the curve of a robe or the angle of sunlight on the temple wall, but it will miss the stillness that makes those images matter. Occasionally, travellers stay for a few days as lay guests, participating in the routine, waking with the bell, eating silently, sweeping leaves. Some adapt quickly, grateful for the change of pace. Others find themselves restless by day 2, wondering when something more interesting will happen. This too is part of the teaching. When the outsider leaves, they often bow at the gate. The monk bows back. The exchange is brief, but it carries something unspoken. You brought the world into the monastery for a moment, and the monastery sent you back into the world carrying a little more quiet than you came with. As daylight fades and the sky slips into shades of blue and gold, the monastery gathers itself for the final communal act of the day, evening chanting. It is not a performance, and it is not meant to impress. It is simply the natural bookend to the morning chanting, a way to wrap the day in sound before silence takes over the night. The hall is dimly lit, the lamps or candles casting soft shadows on the wooden beams. Monks enter quietly, each moving to their place on the floor. There is no hurry. The slow rhythm of the day has already set the pace. Robes settle around folded legs, backs straighten, hands come together in a gesture of respect. The air carries the faint scent of incense, already lit and drifting lazily upward. The leader of the chant, often a senior monk, strikes a small bell or wooden block to signal the beginning. The sound is sharp but brief, cutting through the stillness like a gentle summons. And then the voices rise together, deep and resonant, the syllables flowing in a steady stream. Evening chants often include verses of reflection on the impermanence of life, on gratitude for the day just lived, on the aspiration to be of benefit to others. There may be dedications for the well-being of all beings, or blessings for those who offered food and support to the monastery that day. The words are ancient, but they do not feel outdated. They are like stones smoothed by centuries of hands, familiar and enduring. The sound itself does more than carry meaning. It vibrates through the floor, through your chest, through the quiet that surrounds the hall. The chanting is not sung so much as sustained, each voice blending into the others until individuality disappears. The effect is less about melody and more about immersion, a deep, enveloping resonance that holds you still. Sometimes the chant is long, unfolding in slow waves that seem to stretch time. Other times it is short, just a few key verses before settling into silence. But always, there is a point where the words taper off and the sound fades into nothing. The hall holds the silence, as if it were part of the chant itself. After the final bow, no one rushes to leave. The monks rise slowly, stacking cushions or folding their mats, moving as quietly as they entered. Outside, the air has cooled. Crickets begin their own evening chorus. The temple grounds feel softer in the dark, the paths lit only by moonlight or the warm glow of lanterns. Evening chanting does not so much end the day as dissolve it. The small details, a bowl of rice, a shared smile, the the sweep of a broom, are left to rest where they are, folded into the memory of the day. Tomorrow will begin again with the morning bell, but for now the night belongs to the quiet that chanting has left behind. When the evening chanting fades and the hall empties, the monastery does not simply shut down like a shop closing for the night. For some monks, the day's deepest practice is only beginning. Meditating in the dark is as quiet as the monastery ever gets, a silence so complete that even the smallest sound feels amplified. It is here, in this darkness, that the mind meets itself without distraction. The meditation hall is lit only enough to move without stumbling. A single candle may flicker on the altar, its light barely reaching the edges of the room. The rest is shadow. Shapes soften, colours disappear, and the hall feels bigger somehow, as though it extends beyond the walls into the night itself. Monks enter one by one, finding their cushions without a word. The sound of robes brushing the floor is the loudest thing you hear. Once seated, everyone settles into stillness. Eyes may be closed completely or left half open in the traditional posture, but with so little light, the distinction hardly matters. The absence of sight sharpens everything else. The rhythm of your breath seems louder than usual. The occasional rustle from another monk feels like a major event. Somewhere outside, a night insect drones steadily, its sound threading through the darkness. Inside, the candle flame wavers, then steadies, casting a slow-moving shadow on the wall. Meditating in the dark strips away the last props of the day. There is no scenery to rest your gaze on, no visible reminder of the hall's order and symmetry. There is only you, your breath, and the mind, which, left to itself, will try to fill the darkness with old thoughts, scraps of memory, or imagined shapes. The practice is to see these for what they are, flickers in the mind's own candlelight. Sometimes the dark brings calm, like slipping into a warm pool. Other times it feels unsettling. Without the usual visual anchors, the mind can drift into strange territory, sudden bursts of anxiety, odd images, a restless urge to shift your posture. These too are part of the practice. You meet them, breathe with them, and watch them pass. The stillness deepens. Minutes lose their edges. The boundary between you and the quiet around you begins to blur. You are not trying to achieve anything here. You are simply resting in what is already present, the way the candle rests in its own light. When the sitting ends, it does so without fanfare. A soft bell rings. The candle is extinguished, and the hall folds back into darkness. Monks rise slowly, stepping out into the cool night. The air feels fresher now, the stars overhead brighter. Meditating in the dark does not give you something to take away. It leaves you with less, fewer distractions, fewer certainties, fewer illusions. And in the monastery, less is often exactly enough. When the last meditation ends and the monks step out of the hall, the monastery slips fully into night. It is a stillness unlike any other time of day, deeper than the pause before dawn, softer than the hush of afternoon study. The moon becomes the quiet overseer of the grounds, casting its pale light across stone paths, temple roofs, and the still water of the courtyard pond. The buildings seem to exhale. Lanterns glow faintly at doorways, their light catching the edges of wooden beams and tiled eaves. Shadows stretch long and still across the ground, broken only when a breeze stirs the leaves of the old trees. The smell of incense lingers from the evening chanting, mingling with the cool scent of damp earth. Most monks retire to their quarters after the night's final bow. These rooms are small and spare, just a low bed or mat, perhaps a shelf for robes and a few personal items. Some monks remain awake a little longer, reading by lamplight or continuing their meditation in private, but for the most part, the monastery now belongs to silence. The absence of artificial noise is striking. There are no cars rumbling in the distance, no televisions humming through thin walls, no music leaking from a neighbour's window. Instead, the night is shaped by subtle sounds, the soft rustle of bamboo in the wind, the croak of a night frog near the pond, the far-off bark of a village dog. Each sound arrives alone, unhurried, and fades without urgency. The moonlight is a presence in itself. It spills over the temple courtyard, turning stone and gravel to silver. It catches on the polished wood of the meditation hall's doors, on the upturned corners of the roof, on the heads of statues that stand like guardians in the stillness. Moving through it feels different than moving through daylight. Your steps are slower, softer, as though you are walking inside a held breath. Sometimes a monk will take a slow circuit of the grounds before sleeping, walking barefoot over the cool stones. The quiet of night walking is different from the quiet of day, less a discipline, more a surrender. The air is cooler, the body more at ease, the mind less inclined to chase after tasks. Inside, the monastery's heart beats in its own slow rhythm. The chanting and work of the day are behind it, the bells of the morning still hours away. Everything seems suspended, the tools put away, the floors swept, the altars tended. Even the candle stubs left from earlier burnings seem content to rest. Eventually, one by one, the last lamps are extinguished. The moon remains, patient and unblinking, until it trades places with the sun. And for a few more hours, the monastery sleeps in its moonlit stillness, wrapped in the kind of quiet that makes you feel the world has always been this way. By the time the monastery has settled into its moonlit stillness, the monks are already heading into their simplest and most overlooked practice: sleeping. For most people, sleep is a collapse at the end of a long day, a tumble into unconsciousness. Here, even rest is approached with the same quiet discipline that shapes everything else. Monks sleep on simple bedding, often just a thin mat, a folded blanket, and perhaps a small pillow if they have one. The room is bare of distractions. No bookshelf leaning under the weight of novels, no framed photographs, no alarm clock glowing in the dark. The walls hold nothing but shadow. This is deliberate. The fewer objects there are, the less the mind clings to. Before lying down, there is usually a brief pause, a moment to reflect on the day, to dedicate any merit from one's practice to the benefit of all beings. The act is small, silent, and easily missed if you don't know to look for it, but it sets the tone. Even in sleep, the intention to live mindfully remains. The posture is not accidental either. Many monks sleep on their right side, the same posture said to have been favoured by the Buddha in his final rest. The body is aligned straight, one hand tucked under the cheek, the other resting along the side. It's comfortable enough to drift into sleep, but structured enough to avoid sinking into the chaos of tangled limbs and sprawling positions. The night in a monastery is quiet in a way that makes sleep feel different. There are no electronic hums, no passing traffic, no flicker of a television screen from another room. The mind, already slowed by a day of measured speech and deliberate action, drifts easily into rest. Even dreams tend to carry the residue of the day's stillness. Images of walking paths, chanting in the hall, the play of sunlight on water. But this doesn't mean monks are immune to the ordinary quirks of sleep. Sometimes the night is interrupted by a creak in the building, the bark of a village dog, or the occasional human sound, a cough from a nearby room, a shifting of blankets. The difference is that these interruptions are met without much resistance. They arise, they pass, and sleep resumes. The duration of rest is often shorter than in lay life. Many monks rise well before dawn, meaning sleep is a matter of quality over quantity. The body adapts, finding its rhythm in the balance between wakefulness and rest. When the morning bell rings, there is no groaning or bargaining for 5 more minutes. The night's stillness has already done its work. Dreams here are not escapes from the day, but gentle extensions of it. They carry the same slow current, the same unhurried pace, as if even in sleep the mind continues walking the path it follows in waking life. And when the eyes open in the dark before dawn, it is simply time to continue. The night in the monastery is short, not because the hours themselves are fewer, but because they seem to pass without resistance. Sleep is not a deep plunge into oblivion here. It is a soft, steady drifting, like a leaf resting on water, and just as naturally, it ends. In the faintest shade of pre-dawn, before even the first bird stirs, the stillness begins to shift. Somewhere in the distance, a monk moves quietly in his quarters, the creak of floorboards carrying farther than it would in daylight. A faint rustle of robes, the scrape of a door sliding open, the almost imperceptible sound of bare feet on stone. The air at this hour is cool and impossibly fresh, with a kind of clarity that seems to exist only before sunrise. Mist sometimes clings to the edges of the courtyard, blurring the lines between the buildings and the sky. The moon, if it hasn't yet set, hangs low and pale, making way for the light that is coming. And then, the first strike of the morning bell. Deep, resonant, unhurried. It rolls through the compound like a wave, slipping under doorways, stirring the air inside the meditation hall, nudging the monks gently but firmly into wakefulness. The sound does not rush. It arrives, lingers, fades, and then returns again. There is no hesitation in rising. In the monastery, the day does not begin with negotiations between the mind and the alarm clock. You simply get up. The mat is folded, the robe is adjusted, and you step into the day as if it has been waiting for you. Outside, the sky is shifting through its first colours, from deep indigo to pale blue to the faintest wash of gold. A few stars still glimmer stubbornly. The silhouettes of trees emerge against the lightening horizon. In the distance, a rooster calls, not so much announcing the day as acknowledging what everyone here already knows. It has begun. Monks move toward the meditation hall in small streams, their figures quiet against the growing light. There is no chatter, no hurry. Each step is deliberate, the same as yesterday and the day before. Inside, cushions are set in place, incense smoke curls upward, and the hall takes on that particular stillness that is somehow full rather than empty. The morning chanting will soon begin, and with it the cycle will fold into itself again. Meditation, arms round, sweeping, study, work, evening chanting, sleep, each day repeating the last, yet never quite the same. The rhythm is not a prison, it is a path. And so the next dawn approaches not as a surprise, but as a continuation. The monastery does not mark time with dramatic endings and beginnings. It flows, the way the bell's sound flows, into the air and back into silence. And as the first full light touches the temple roof, the day is already underway, and the monks are already walking it. By now you have seen the monastery's days unfold from the first strike of the morning bell to the last breath of moonlit stillness. You have walked its paths barefoot, sat through its silences, chanted its verses, eaten its single daily meal. And if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed something. Nothing here is leading to a grand finale. There is no finish line, no climactic moment when the work is done and the enlightenment switch is flipped. The monastic life is a long path without a final destination. It is walked one step, one chant, one breath at a time. The routines repeat not because anyone is trapped in them, but because they are the practice itself. Each dawn is both new and the same. Each sweeping of the courtyard is the first and the 1000th. The path does not end because it is not meant to. For the monks, this is not discouraging. It is liberating. Without the constant push toward a distant goal, there is space to be here, in this exact moment, doing this exact thing. Meditation is not for tomorrow's insight. It is for the sitting itself. Chanting is not for earning merit later. It is for the sound as it rises now. Even the simplest tasks, folding robes, fetching water, become complete in themselves. To the outside eye, this can seem like nothing much is happening, but within the stillness, the changes are subtle and deep. The mind grows steadier, the heart grows softer, the grip on the self loosens, a little at a time. And though there is no grand arrival, there are countless small arrivals, moments when the air feels a little clearer, the path a little lighter underfoot. The long path is walked not because there is somewhere to get to, but because walking it is the life itself. And when you accept that, you see that every dawn is both a beginning and a continuation, every step both movement and arrival. The monastery does not promise a destination. It offers something rarer, a way to live where the journey itself is enough. And so the bell will sound again tomorrow, the robes will be folded, and the monks will step once more into a day that is already whole.